Hello, and welcome to my living room.
This is a video that I wish I had 4 years ago to tell me everything I needed to know about collecting Anthuriums, where to find them, how to grow them, how to keep them beautiful. We're gonna do that today. Get cozy and let's get started. We have a lot to cover here.
We are gonna need so much coffee. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Erin. For those of you who love plants and are Anthurium curious, you love the look of an Anthurium, you've seen them on social media, but you might be intimidated and don't know quite where to start. This video is for you. We are going to go over some basic care tips. Which plants are a good idea for a beginning Anthurium collector? They are not all created equally, and some of them will have you absolutely beating your head against a wall and feeling very discouraged. Some of them are going to grow for you like a dream. Everybody's conditions are different. Everybody has a different way of doing things. This is simply a guide for those of you who are interested in starting to collect Anthuriums but don't want to screw it up, because some of these guys, let's face it, can be quite expensive. Let's get started. So which Anthuriums make the best plants for a beginner? This is a totally subjective list of plants. I want you to be successful, so I'm going to tell you the ones that have worked for me and have given me the least amount of problems. So you probably know your big box garden Anthurium, the Anthurium andreata, which is fine and beautiful, and I especially love the purple variety, but I am here to elevate your knowledge and understanding of Anthurium. So you're going to have to look a little bit harder to find the following Anthurium, but there's some beautiful ones that are available for under 50, under 40 that are very high yield. So I'm going to point you in the direction of those. Some of these hybrids can get so confusing, it can get really intimidating. I totally get that. But you'll see many combinations of Anthurium magnificum, papillolamina, luxurians, crystallinum, warocqueanum, clarinerbium. I feel like that's very common. The first one on our list is Anthurium David Portia Dream. This is one of my favorite plants in the whole house. The size up on this guy has been absolutely incredible. So we keep jumping at a very rapid pace. David Portia Dream is a hybrid of the Anthurium forgetii and the Anthurium luxurians. Both on their own are quite forgiving plants. Some of these hybrids are so easy to care for, and so this is one of them. So I would say this is an excellent choice if you want to feel right out the gate like you know what you're doing. Very first Anthurium that I got, which is I think a great starting Anthurium, is the Anthurium radicans luxurians. Again, a luxuriant hybrid. So this is my Anthurium that I got from Plantstory. It's very sturdy. It doesn't hardly ever crisp or yellow. So I feel like this is a great starter Anthurium for you. Also, price point wise on all of these, they're not going to break the bank, because I would hate for you to start out Anthurium collecting something very expensive and just have it be a total bust. So this one I've had for a while, so don't be alarmed. The Anthurium pallidiflorum is a great beginner Anthurium. This is what's known as a strap Anthurium for obvious reasons. It's really not fussy. It's a different look than the other Anthurium. This is a great one. Anthurium magnificum silver. This looks crazy. So I've had this one for quite a while. It sizes up like crazy. I'm going to have to repot this. But this one, that's the newest leaf right there. This one really seems to do well for a lot of people. So I feel like one that is often seen on social media and a lot of plant collectors have multiple of because they are so beautiful is the Anthurium crystallinum. This is considered a velvet Anthurium. They will thrive in a multitude of conditions. Ambient, which is like what I do, which means it's growing ambient in my living room and my living space. I don't have it in a specific grow tent to boost the extra humidity. If you asked me, the number one thing, in my opinion, I thought was the most crucial to the success of growing your Anthurium, without a doubt, it's lighting. And I would die on that hill, absolutely. I subscribe to a more relaxed school of thought for lighting. So some people are very technical. They love using the light meter. I'm kind of more of the Sydney plant guy school of thought, where I have a light meter, but I probably have used it maybe once or twice just for fun. I don't use it as a guide for my plants, but I do have quite a few Russo Plant Care grow lights, and that is mostly what I use, to be honest. So they're on 12 hours a day. The guidelines per Russo Plant Care are for your light to be about 1.5 to 6 feet from the grow light. And I have a ton of plants under just one grow light. It accommodates quite a few. Some other very good grow lights are the Mother brand, Soltech, the Sansi grow lights. They're all great. Both Hyla from Russo Plant Care and Daryl from Houseplant Journal are sort of pioneering quantifying the term bright indirect light. I'm going to put up some guidelines for how much plants need for growth via foot candles. There's a couple different measurements of light, one of them being foot candles, very minimal to no growth. It's this many foot candles, moderate, and then high growth. So I love my plants pumping out leaves. So I have them on a grow light 12 hours a day. I have definitely gotten a little overzealous with the grow lights, and you must be very mindful, especially when there are new leaves emerging, to not have the grow lights so aggressive, and all of us do it. It's just something you have to be mindful of. Daryl from Houseplant Journal has often said there's no such thing as people with green thumbs, just people with like very large unobstructed windows. And it's absolutely true. There's a ton of light in this house, and it makes me look good because my plants get a ton of light, and then they get the grow lights on top of that. So I'm able to grow nice big leaves. Take that with a grain of salt. Let's talk about watering. Here are my tips that I do for my plants, and it depends on your environment, your substrate, but a good rule of thumb is, especially, I'm imagining if you're a new collector starting out with Anthuriums, you're not going to amass a huge collection immediately, although they are very addicting, and that could quite possibly happen. That happened to me very quickly. You will likely have a reasonable amount of plants to really baby and take care of and just sort of watch like a hawk. So what I recommend is, if you're buying an Anthurium, usually the substrate it comes in is going to be a nice chunky aeroid mix. If it looks a little suspect to you, if it doesn't look aerated enough, consider repotting it yourself. If it's really terrible, just do it right away. Otherwise, I would wait for the plant to kind of acclimate to your conditions. You can use a water meter if you don't trust yourself. That's a great newbie tool. I don't use one anymore so much. I stick my finger into the substrate, and if it's about an inch or two dry, I will give it a water. Or if I see the moss on top is quite dry, I will also give that a water. By doing that, you actually get a better feel for the water and nutrient needs of your plant, and you can kind of gauge better, oh, I just watered this long ago, and it went through water pretty quickly. So you'll have a better gauge of when to water your plant. The important thing is, don't let your plant sit in the water, and you're going to want to have really great drainage. Although that is controversial as well, because some people like to grow in no drainage, which you can do. No drainage is great, but I'm assuming that you, as like a new grower, have some drainage in your pot with some holes in the bottom, which I think is a good idea, especially when you're first starting out. Use a little drip tray and just dump that out and be on your way. So, because it's also going to attract fungus gnats, root rot, if your plant is sitting and has like little wet socks. Okay, I feel good about telling you that advice. Okay, so this is a great example of a plant that needs to be watered. So first of all, it's going to need more nutrients and a little bit more frequent watering because it's putting out this new beautiful leaf. This is my second David Portilla Dreams. And if you look at the substrate, I mean, the looks can be misleading, but if you just go ahead and put your finger in, my very old looking hand, it's actually quite a bit dry, about an inch down. And also, this plant is great. This is why I recommended it for a beginner, because this plant, it's putting out a new leaf. It's also flowering. Something's always happening with this guy. But most importantly, it needs a water. Hello. I just wanted to interrupt myself and discuss a little bit more about watering. In Southern California, I've mentioned this before, our water is very hard. There's all kinds of calcium deposits that if they build up on your faucet, they're going to build up on your plant. So I do, in fact, filter my water. A filter is going to filter that out pretty well for you. It's going to improve your water condition to water your precious aeroid babies. Some viewers brought to my attention several months ago the use of API stress coat. This is actually an off-label use for an aquarium water amendment that is meant to help with stress and sick fish. It has a bit of aloe in it. It gives the fish a nice little bit of a stress coat, and it helps eliminate the excessive chlorine in the water. So anecdotally, I have been trying this and I have noticed that my plants seem a bit more robust. They're healthier, they crisp less, seem healthier overall. And I feel like anyone who's actually tried this can corroborate this. But again, it is an off-label use, but I did want to mention it to you. The amount that you use for the stress coat is so very little, 10 drops per gallon or half an ml per gallon. You could literally hand this bottle down to your grandchildren, but I would be remiss, again, if I did not mention it because it is a newer thing that I'm using and I can't live without it. So many of my coworkers will ask me to troubleshoot their plants for them. And the first thing I ask them is, when was the last time you fertilized it? So nutrients, fertilizing, plant food, it's all the same thing. And this aspect often gets overlooked in a new plant parent. And that's fine because people think watering a plant is good enough. And it may be for a short time, but then after that, you might notice some sad leaves, some discoloration, just an overall failure to thrive of the plant. There's all kinds of nutrients you can add to your plants, but I want to keep this simple for you. So if you're going to add one thing, I would do Super Thrive Foliage Pro or some other liquid fertilizer that has a good NPK ratio. I'm, of course, talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium for your foliage health and color. So the liquid plant food is diluted. You have to dilute your plant food in some ratio of water. The one I'm talking about, you do 1 gallon of water and 1 teaspoon of Foliage Pro. That is going to put you in production mode. So you can do many different dilutions. I usually do with almost every watering. I do this 1 teaspoon per gallon because I want my plant pumping out strong leaves and getting bigger. It doesn't just work for Anthuriums. This works for any of your houseplants. The other thing I would consider adding is, you will notice in my plants, I have nary a fungus gnats, which is often a complaint of plant owners. How do I get rid of these fungus gnats? Now you can get a sticky trap and that's going to get rid of the adults, but what about all the eggs? There's more eggs than we'd like to think about. I add 1 teaspoon per gallon of hydrogen peroxide to my watering mix with my Foliage Pro, and that's what I water with. They're not buzzing around and being annoying. There is one, I would say now it's a crucial nutritional aspect for your Anthurium and any of your aeroids for that matter, and that is mycorrhizae / beneficial bacteria. I wish I had known about this from day one of my collecting period. This is basically steroids for your plant. So the way this works is you inoculate your roots with something like this. There's many different brands. I personally use Great White. I love this. However, the writing is big enough for an ant to read. So I'm going to help you out here. Fungi build a microbial system in and on roots, enhancing the uptake of nutrients and water. So this is going to make your plant, it will be more tolerant of watering fluctuations. It's going to grow the craziest, most reaching fuzzy roots. I believe the fungi, the fuzziness we're seeing is that something called hyphae, which actually help draw in water and nutrients to the plant. But I have never seen such strong and robust roots since after applying this to my repots. So there's a couple of ways to use this. It's really hard to mess up. Let's say you received a seedling. You're going to repot it in your chunky aeroid mix. When you repot it, you're going to sprinkle, it's like a little pinch. This is like nature's seasoning salt. You're going to sprinkle a little pinch of the Great White or your mycorrhizae fungi to your roots, and then you're going to pot it in your substrate as usual. You can also add it into your water. This one specifically says you can do this every 2 to 3 weeks. I definitely don't do it that frequently. I pretty much just do it when I am repotting. But also this guy here, my Monstera Tycon, kind of went through a dormancy. That that was immediately stopped when I inoculated the soil with Great White. If you have a plant that is not thriving so much, you've checked out the rooting system, your leaves, your watering, your nutrients, if everything seems to be checking out, don't be afraid to repot it, change out your substrate, add a little bit of mycorrhizae fungi to the root system, and I'm telling you, sometimes that is the last misstep to catapulting your plant into planty success. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the substrate or the soil, or actually lack of soil, that goes along with raising Anthurium. So you may hear the word substrate thrown around, or chunky arid mix, or soilless mix, and that is the ideal mix you're going to put your Anthurium in. The reason why regular soil generally won't do is it's too dense, it holds on to too much moisture. In the wild, your plant is growing on a tree, it's climbing up, it's got chunky roots, it needs a lot of aeration. So we're trying to mimic that at home with our houseplants. So the way we do that is by creating some materials that hold on to more moisture, some that allow for better aeration, that allow for a better water-air ratio, and so the plant will not suffocate. Probably the number one enemy in any of our houseplants, airwoods or not, is going to be root rot. This is one of the reasons why we do a chunky soil mix. So everybody has a different ratio that they like. The components are a little bit different, kind of the same, but very different. You can purchase an arid mix yourself. There's so many places that sell them. If you're in deep like I am, or if you can't be bothered, you can choose to purchase all of the individual components and make your own chunky arid mix, and kind of like make tweaks according to what you have noticed works with your plants or like a specific plant. What I want to show you is what I like to put my aroids in. So this is a mixture of coconut chips or coconut husks, a little bit of leca, which are clay pebbles, a little bit, this is a mixture of perlite and pumice for aeration, some worm castings for added nutrients. It's kind of buried in here, but tree fern fiber, which is really great for holding on to moisture. And then orchiata, which is also really good for holding on to a little bit moisture, but creating a ton of aeration. My plants seem to be really happy with this mix. I was using charcoal, but I haven't decided that it really makes a big difference, and the purpose is as an absorptive agent. So some people have wondered whether or not it actually absorbs some of the nutrients that you're putting in too much. Anyway, but I don't know that it matters that much, if you ask me. That's just my opinion. I wanted to show you how I repot plants. This is my Anthurium forgetii. This is the last leaf, and this is the most recent leaf. So you can see here that this one is much bigger than this one, although this one does look very cool. But you can tell when I look at it that it is definitely aggressively in need of repotting. I've got some serious roots here, and you can see because it's been able to navigate around the chunky aroid mix, the plant looks really healthy, but it's literally bursting at the seams. And so here I just have there's a little bit of sphagnum moss here, and mostly some coconut chips and some perlite. I'm just going to really quickly repot this. So a couple of clues that it's time to repot your plant is, it's visually bursting at the seams, but most importantly, if your plant starts throwing out some wonky leaves, discolored leaves, smaller leaves, funny leaves, in this case, smaller leaves, we have two clues here that it is time to indeed size up. Okay, so we have our very cool looking forgetii. We have our substrate here, our chunky aroid mix, and a well-draining pot of your choice. I like to use clear pot because then I can see what's going on. Just to be super on top of preventing root rot, I like to have a lot of aeration. Oh, one thing I did want to mention, had this forgetii not been such a quick grower, I may have not upsized so aggressively. I may have gone to this size. If it's a slower grower, don't be so aggressive with your pot size when you upsize. That's it. I'm just going to briefly talk about transitioning your Anthurium into Leca. So Leca are these clay pebbles here. The way I do this, I'm gonna oversimplify this, but what you do is, in my experience, some of the smaller plant and younger plants will tolerate this transition a little bit easier. So when I received this seedling, this is an Anthurium warraquianum. It's actually, this one is a very well-behaved warraquianum. It's got a new leaf coming here. So what I did when I got her was I put her into water with some nutrients, still under the grow light, and I let her hang out in the water until she grew some water roots. And then I transitioned her into Leca. You best believe that I definitely inoculated the roots with a little bit of gray white powder. So what I did then she hung out, and here's her rooting system now. So she's in a little bit of a water reservoir, and she's in a net pot here. So you see if her root system is really robust. Some people say you should flush out your Leca. No one ever does that, though. Can I just say, maybe some people do it. I don't ever do it. The water that she gets is the same as the rest of my Anthurium. So you can get very technical if you want. You can test the pH. If your plant is not doing well, then go ahead and do that. If not, like this one, I'm just letting it ride until it tells me otherwise that there's a problem. That is the 2-minute intro to Leca. If you're curious, if you've seen it before and you're like, how do I do this? What do I do? That's it. The other version of semi-hydroponics, just like the Leca, is pon. This is actually a mixture of pon and perlite and a little bit of vermiculite. Basically, you're growing the plant in several different varieties of rocks, and I have a whole video on pon if you want to do a deeper dive. In fact, there's many videos out there. The thing with pon is, so I have this in a self-watering pot, and it's just kind of like the Leca, but this Clarinervium seems quite happy and has grown this little fluffy, robust root system. Clarinervium is a hardy starter plant, so this is a good option for you. This is my Anthurium regale. This is not a great starter plant for beginners. I would highly not recommend this as a plant. This one needs a little bit more humidity. If you're going to try it in a regular chunky arid mix, I've had good luck, or better luck, I would say, growing this with some moss on the top in ambient. That helps, but also this one really seems to like semi-hydro. So it really seems to like that same mix of pon, perlite, and vermiculite, and it's throwing out a new leaf here. So you definitely have options. So here's the thing is, you just need to have a reservoir at the bottom with some water. But this is kind of an easy, set it and forget it. Once it's established in the semi-hydro, they're pretty easy and really fun to grow. Okay, let's talk about one of the easiest aspects of Anthurium care, and that is temperature. These guys, just like you and I, if you're feeling hot or you're feeling cold, your plant is likely also. These do not tolerate extremes of hot or cold. That is actually where they start to be a little bit more finicky than your succulents or your palms. And then you would start to see they can almost appear freezer burned, or their growth will be a bit stunted. You will actually notice that your growth does slow down in the winter months and speeds up in the spring and summer months. Humidity. So you do not need to grow these Anthurium in a grow tent or in a grow cabinet or in a cloche. Most of my plants are grown in ambient. Of course, everyone's climate is a little bit different, and in Southern California, it allows me to do that. There's air conditioning in the house, there's heating in the house. I am able to keep the temperature somewhat normal for them. For the humidity, quite frequently, the humidity here runs in the 30s, and the plants are relatively fine. If I notice that it's a little bit drier and there is a little bit more crisping, I will often put the humidifier on them. But I think, honestly, one of the best things to do, if you notice excessive crisping or leaf tearing, especially on your plants that enjoy a little bit more humidity, like your Anthurium warraquianum or Queen Anthurium, I have noticed that if I put some moss around the base of the plant, that actually helps quite a bit and help the plant thrive a little bit better. Okay, let's say you've just purchased some fresh imports from God only knows where, and they've arrived today. What do you do? So let's talk about climatization or acclimation process of your Anthurium. Depending on where you get them, sometimes I order plants from Equigenera in California. Well, that's not coming very far. It's just maybe like a day or two journey. They're fine. They'll get a couple hours of water before I stick them into their respective homes. Florida and Equigenera in Ecuador, if it's a fresh import, here's what I'm going to do. Unpack the roots very carefully from, usually it's in like a sphagnum moss that they've packed it in. Sometimes the roots are well hydrated and sometimes they are dry and the moss is dry as a bone. So what I'm going to do is I'll stick it in water, some very diluted nutrients and some very dilute hydrogen peroxide. And I'm going to let it hang out for a couple of hours to a couple of days. If I'm going to put it into semi-hydro, it's going to hang out even longer because it's going to grow some water roots. But I am going to inspect the roots first, and visual and an olfactory process, because you know what? Those roots, they should not smell like a fish. If it smells like fish, if it's squishy, if it's black, if it doesn't look right to you, it's probably rotten. So cut that off with a nice pair of sterile scissors. And then go ahead and go about your process of putting the plant in some water and help plump up and perk up the plant. Then you can go ahead and pot it up into your respective medium. I took the liberty, today in this living room, it's 53% humidity. It's 82 degrees in here. It's hot, but the plants tolerate it here just fine. Sometimes people put their plant in a prop box to try to emulate the humidity of where it came from. For me, there's no grow tent here. This is what it is. So it's sort of a sink or swim situation. They have to eventually get used to living in ambient. To be honest, most of them do that just fine. It's rarely a problem. Sometimes your plant will drop a leaf or two. That's normal under the best of circumstances. And then finally, it will take a leaf or two. The plant will grow back and rebound, succumb to the fact that it lives in this new environment and will be fine or not. Sometimes the plant just looks terrible when it arrived. The leaves are all frizzled. There's fungus on them. There's pests. If there's pests, I would throw it out. That's just me. If the leaves look terrible from the get-go, if they're shriveled, if they look freezer burned, if they're already crisp or very yellow, you can just cut that off so the plant can go ahead and concentrate on healing and having new growth. Because once the leaf is damaged like that, it's not coming back. That's it. So your leaves are not going to be perfect. This is a really fun hobby because we're chasing the perfection of like big perfect leaves, and sometimes you absolutely get that. But oftentimes, like in the wild even, some of the plants look a bit shredded and yellow and crispy and wild, and they come out wonky and ripped in the best of conditions in their natural habitat with all the humidity in the world. This is a great example of that. I'm going to show you this plant. All right, this is my Anthurium Zamora Queen. I love this queen hybrid so much. So this is a pretty nice looking leaf, but it's still got some yellow spots and it's still got some crisping. And this is just the natural progression of this plant. This one here is like on its way out. This is the second to most recent leaf, which still looks quite beautiful, but it came out a little bit wonky as it emerged, and that's fine. And then here is the newest leaf that's still unfurling here, which is absolute perfection. I haven't done anything different. This is just the plant being the plant. So please don't get discouraged or if something isn't going right. However, I mean, if you're dropping all the leaves suddenly, you could suspect many things, but this is normal on this plant. What could go wrong? A million things could go wrong, but let's talk about some basic things. So we talked about the root rot already. So let's say your plant is just looking kind of sad, yellowing, the plant is drooping. Chances are the root rot has been there for a little while. The condition of the leaf is almost like a later sign. Think about your watering pattern. Maybe the plant has been a bit overwatered. So maybe you need to readjust your soil that you have so it drains more quickly, or you're watering less, or it's less water retaining. Brown crisping. Chances are you are underwatering. It could be lack of humidity. A little bit of crisping is normal for the Anthurium. Under the best of circumstances, you're going to see some crisping sometime. But excessive crisping, what you could do to adjust your humidity is you could do supplemental humidity. Grow tent. If it's a seedling, you could put it in a little glass cloche or a little grow cabinet. Put some damp moss on the top of the plant. If it's a plant that you're noticing out of the other plants you have, this one seems to be a little bit more susceptible to crisping. That has helped me quite a bit. Once it's crisp, yellow, it's not unyellowing or uncrisping. That is it. Spots. That could be fungal, which you can use an antifungal. I had a Spiritus Sancti, which was getting fungal spots. I gave it a little spray down with Physand 20, very dilute, and that took the problem away right away. So that's a very strong antifungal, antiviral, antimicrobial. But if it's a really expensive plant and you don't want to lose it, then it worked. Also, another sign of leaf yellowing, especially on the outer periphery of the leaves, could be a sign of nutrient deficiency. Chris from Pretty and Green has a really good video on the signs and symptoms of your leaf and what nutrient deficiency or nutrient burn looks like, which I thought was very helpful. Let's talk about the inevitable, pests.
Oh my god, ew, David!
Pests will eventually happen to you. Some are easier to get rid of than others, and some of them will be the absolute bane of your existence. So let's talk about the easiest one, I think, to spot, which is a mealybug. Under any other circumstances, a mealybug might be cute. It looks like a little cotton ball, a little Q-tip, but oh my god, they are insidious. There is never a time when you are treating a mealybug one time. So what you can do, take a paintbrush or something dipped in alcohol, and you can spot treat the mealybug, and it will instantly shrivel up and die. And then you can make, if you want to go the natural way, you can make a solution of rubbing alcohol and water and dish soap, and you can spray your plant with that. But you can also use an insecticide. If it's a severe mealybug infestation, you may want to change out the soil, rinse your roots, the works. Depending on the expense of the plant and how severe the infestation is, sometimes you lose a plant to a mealybug. That is kind of how it goes. It's going to be a battle. It's a fight with the mealybug. These guys are tenacious, and they're almost like the final boss of the pest world. But a feel-good pest, I would say, is scale. These are, I feel like, quite easy to combat. I've used insecticides with them, systemic granules with them for major infestations, and for me, it was a one treatment kind of deal, and that was it. And it was a huge infestation, so you can feel good about it, a scale infestation. Spider mites. Spider mites, they love alocasia. They love your velvet anthuriums. They will get into everything. Spider mite damage is like little dots. It's terrible. They're tiny. I would invest in a magnifying glass with a light and do regular inspections. If nothing else, make sure you give your Anthurium a good wipe down. Clean those leaves every once in a while. Give them a shower just to help create a less hospitable environment for the spider mites. They also love a drier environment, so a more humidified environment is a deterrent for a spider mite. The one word of caution is to not use, if you are into this, don't use systemic granules on your plants where you may suspect spider mites, because they love it. They will proliferate. It does not work. You would have to use an actual miticide instead, because it is a member of the arachnid family, and some of the insecticides do not work with spider mite. You can use a natural soap deterrent, spray off your plant. You can change out the soil if you like, but they are awful. They spread really quickly. We've all been victimized by spider mites. Lastly, thrips. I received a plant once with thrips on it, and it was nuts, and I just threw the plant away. It was like a little tiny clarinerbium, and it wasn't expensive, and it wasn't worth jeopardizing the entire crew. Insecticidal soap, insecticide, same treatment as the other, more or less, just equally annoying. Be ready. Decide if you're a naturalist person, if you love an insecticide or a pesticide. Just make that decision, because it's gonna happen. Okay, where to buy Anthurium? Of course, Equigenera has international locations in Florida and a location in California. It's a pretty big company. Most of the time, I'm very happy with my purchases and the customer service as well. So it's a solid, reliable source. They sell on their own website, and then they also sell on Palm Street, which is the best plant app ever, period. It's like a metaverse of plant sources and plant stores doing live sales, plant purges. I highly, highly suggest downloading that app. I will post a link in the description. Pretty much anything you're looking for, basic or as like rare as you can imagine, it's on this app. Of course, there's Etsy, BWH, Canopy Plants, Gabriella Plants. Where else? Oh, and I have bought directly from Woohoo Tropicals. That was so much information, but also so much fun. And thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate you, and I hope you like this video. Give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe if you love plants and you want to know more. If you're a seasoned Anthurium collector, I want to know what plant tips you have for the newbie community to help them from making the same mistakes. Would love to hear your thoughts on this. In the meantime, I am wishing you the biggest leaf energy, and I will see you next time. Cheers, friends.